Have you ever fallen down, fallen into a pit, just had plans, dreams, work, effort, energy derailed? We're going to dive in today on the science of the comeback with Dr. Toby Brooks. Toby, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. Thank you.
Tell us, when you're down, when you're out, when you're defeated, and you want to come back and need to come back, what is the science of the comeback?
Yeah, so it comes from a place of lived experience. I can tell you that. A lot of times experts are either learned experts or school of hard knocks. And I'd like to think I'm both. Performance scientist by trade, athletic trainer, and a strength coach. And over the years, as I worked with more and more high performing athletes, I really kind of started to take a critical look at those that kind of made it out and made it back from that injury and those that were never the same. And what do the high achievers have in common? And what do those that maybe struggle from that point forward have in common? And so it's really kind of led me down this path. I've recognized that it's not just athletes, it's artists, it's entrepreneurs, it's high achievers of all stripes. And inevitably there is kind of a moment of what now? I call it the what the hell's next moment. And I've had more than one of those in my career, but recognizing that even though you feel like you've been pulled apart, and that's where the name of the show came from, Becoming Undone, where you feel like you've been ripped into pieces, recognizing that what you have in front of you is a purpose unfinished, something left undone that's ahead of you, that drives you forward and propels you. So that's kind of where it all came from.
And you are right. We either come by it through lived experience and or learning. Most of us, I think it's a combination, but it is definitely something that you have put effort into, one of those two, and that would be your education. Just before we even get too deep in the conversation, I believe you're currently working on getting your 6th degree.
I am. I just finished finals last week, got my grades today. So as a professor, it's always kind of a little weird. I have to specify, like when I say my finals are done, they're like, do you mean the ones you gave or the ones you took? And usually it means a little bit of both. But yeah, working on a degree in exercise physiology here at Baylor. And prior to that, I was a first-generation college student, started my career at a community college, ended up with my bachelor's degree in athletic training, and then went on to pursue teaching and teacher education, also got an MBA along the way. And I'm just a firm believer in if you want to get better, I always say I don't want to be a year older, I want to be a year better. And part of that for me means specifically pursuing growth.
And as you mentioned, you're also a professor. So could you tell me a little bit more about that? So what do you teach and what's your life like in the professor section of it?
So prior to coming to Baylor, I was more heavily involved as a professor. I spent 15 years at the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center. I was the program director of the graduate program in athletic training, also taught in our PhD program in rehab sciences. So these days, more heavily on the admin side, but I do teach one class a semester, typically an undergraduate anatomy, musculoskeletal anatomy, or a graduate level course in kind of the comparable program that I used to lead in athletic training.
And then in your spare time, because that already sounds pretty robust, I'll put it that way. However, you also are a coach, you are an author, you have your own podcast, and you've developed an app. So you strike me as someone who is very action oriented. Is
100%.
that fair to say?
Yeah. So as an athletic trainer, not a lot of people are really familiar with what athletic trainers do. It's a master's level healthcare credential. At the time I got it, it was a bachelor's level, but to work at the college level, you really needed at least a master's degree and lots of long hours. I mean, if you watch a sporting event, the athletic trainer got there hours before you got there. They're there hours after you leave. 80 hours a week is typical for a college level athletic trainer. So when I gravitated more towards higher ed, it kind of felt like a half-time job. Like I felt like I had plenty of extra time. I had been kind of inculcated in this hyper work world. And so being able to pursue the things that I want on my own schedule, not a coach telling me what time practice was, really felt like freedom to me. So I love to stay busy. I'm very purposeful in how I pursue growth. And so whether that's pursuing a degree or working out or anything in between, like those are things that I really feel free to do these days. Whereas early in my career, it was very much kind of dictated to me when and where.
Right. Well, getting back to this, into the comeback. And so you're working predominantly with athletes. And we all know, I'm fascinated where you see someone get injured and you're like, oh no, it's going to be the end of everything. And then 2 weeks later, they're on the field again. And you're like, wait a minute, if that happened to me, I don't believe that would be the outcome, right? And how do they do that? And then, as you mentioned, there's some athletes that they're not quite able to recapture it. Could you share more about, did you have a light bulb moment where you started putting the pieces together of this isn't just the physical side, something is happening here that
Yeah.
is more in the mind? Could you
Yeah,
explain that?
yeah, for sure. I think early on it was just kind of observational, and I was just it was collecting data. I mean, if I'm honest about it, it was anecdotal, but it was data collection. Over the years, as I started to read more and encounter more about sports psychology and about mindset, in particular, the work of Carol Dweck was really enlightening, and looking at growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and how that can play a tremendous role in the likelihood that someone would be able to overcome adversity. And that was really instructive. Since then, I mean, everybody's kind of heard of Brene Brown and vulnerability work, and that's important. But what I've seen consistently in high achievers is that tendency toward the growth mindset and recognizing that failure isn't something to be avoided. Also, the Stoic philosophy, where they talk about the obstacle is the way, where
That's right.
if we approach life with this idea that I don't want anything bad to happen to me, then we're set up for failure from the jump. Whereas that Stoic
Correct.
philosophy would say the setback and the adversity is the path through which you're strengthened. One of my all-time favorite quotes is, "A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor." Like that
That's
adversity
right.
is where my ability is honed and refined. And if I can view it as formative rather than punitive, then absolutely I can go at this with that growth mindset. It's hard. Like there are times when if it's all falling down around you, it's human nature to just kind of sit in that wreckage and grieve. But
Right.
I don't have to stay there is kind of the message that the science of the comeback would tell me.
So I think for a lot of the people listening to us today, they are probably experiencing challenges or setbacks or obstacles, not so much in recuperating from a physical injury like with your athletes, but really in businesses or a career that's not going as planned, or they're full-time in sales and they just had 3 big deals fall apart. Like there's usually it's something related either to work or in their professional life, relationships deteriorating. They're not taking care of themselves. What is the difference that you see for someone to commit to making the comeback? If you've got an injury, you kind of don't have a choice. I know some of the athletes come back at different levels, but you've got to heal the injury and then do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But what if it's just something, how do we stop from just saying like, oh, well, I guess now this is how it is?
It's a great question. I think it's contextually it's different, but operationally it's very much the same, where I want to take a look forward and define what success looks like, whether that's a month from now, whether that's a year from now, whether that's 5 years from now. It doesn't matter. But I always say strategic in purpose, relentless in pursuit, better every day. The strategic in purpose is kind of the reverse engineering of the success. For that athlete, I don't want them to set a goal of, I want to be the conference player of the year, because they can't control that. I want them to set a goal for, I'm going to show up on time for rehab every day for the next 30 days. Or I'm going to, I can get a little bit more specific and look at things like personal bests. But even that, I mean, if you have a setback 3 weeks in and you've got a 6-month goal, that might derail everything. So what can you control? Being present, having a good attitude, those controllables are kind of the bedrock of the science of the comeback, recognizing that I might not be able to control what the other players on my team do or what other athletes at other schools do, but by golly, I can control myself and I can bring my attitude and I can support my teammates. For an entrepreneur or for an artist, I mean, my daughter's an opera singer and she's a vocal performance major, getting ready to start on her master's degree. And the amount of failure in that world is astronomical. And she would say, like, my job isn't to land roles. My job is to go to auditions. I can control how many auditions I go to. I can't control how many roles I get. And I love that mindset shift. So that's a critical piece of it, is recognizing what I can control, being specific in setting what those goals are. That's the strategic and purpose. The relentless in pursuit is just the execution. Once you've done your homework on the front end, it really does just become a check the box. I did what I needed to do today. And every day, I always build it around this idea of mental, physical, spiritual, and social growth. So every day I want to be working on, for me, being in a classroom. That's the mental piece. The spiritual piece, I could go there, but that can mean different things to different people.
Right.
The physical is I want to eat right. I want to train right. The social, I'm going to reach out and be purposeful in relationships with others. And so if I know that that's the template for my day or my week, then it's just a matter of executing on those things. I don't have to worry or wonder.
You just have to do. And that I could see how someone that's as action oriented as you, that would come easily and be very satisfying. Where does downtime, rest, or relaxation fit into all of that?
Yeah.
Is that part of the physical or the
Yeah.
spiritual?
Did my wife ask you to ask me that question? It's honestly, it doesn't come naturally to me. And I think part of that, if I really get honest and transparent with myself, it's like there's an insecurity that underlies some of this that says I always have to be and do and accomplish and those kinds of things. And I've seen this in performance science. Like if you're my athlete and I'm working with you to get you back from an injury, recovery is a critical part of the entire prescription of what's going to get you better. It's an eternal and essential balance between fitness and fatigue. And that same thing's true in business and other walks of life. The fatigue is easy to see in an athlete. Like they're overtrained and there are measurable evidences of the fact that they are headed in the wrong direction because I'm prescribing movement wrong. It's a little less overt in someone who's an entrepreneur, but there will be evidence. And that's where the data comes in. If I'm doing something that leads every relationship I have to be less than I want it to be, that's evidence. That's data that I'm not there. And that same thing could be said for all for all aspects of that growth, that mental, physical, spiritual, social. The data is not an indictment. It's just data. It's my job to read it and respond to it. If the gauges on my dash are telling me that I'm almost out of gas, but I'm like, I think I can keep going. Eventually, the consequences of that decision are going to land on my lap and I'm going to be walking. So I think for a lot of people, they don't know that the data is there. And even if it is, they ignore it and just try to kind of power through and this kind of work, grind, grit culture takes over. And that's not healthy either.
Yeah. You mentioned one word very quickly in all that information that you were sharing, and I want to circle back to it. You said things we can control, and I can show up every day and I bring my attitude. So my question is, what if the attitude is presenting the problem? So what if it's a high achiever and sabotaging themselves with perspective and self-negative thoughts?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. And if I had the answer to that, my list of coaching clients would be much, much deeper. I think part of that is awareness is kind of the first step in that aspect. So if I recognize that every time someone gives me a compliment, I immediately deflect, or if anytime there's a chance for me to step into the spotlight and I back up, those are some clues. And I think where coaching can come in is it allows a third party to see what we're not oftentimes willing to see in ourselves. And so if someone's able to recognize that, hey, you did a really good job on that, and that was really handled well, and the initial immediate reaction to that was no big deal. Like, no, I want you to take a moment to recognize that you did a good job. That's okay. It's okay to view what you did favorably. Somehow, I think high achievers tend to be so consumed with what's next that we refuse to sit in even a moment of satisfaction. Somehow that's going to undermine my pursuit of whatever's next. I tell this story frequently. I interviewed Charles Austin. He was the gold medalist in the 1996 Atlanta Summer Olympics in the high jump. And he told me the story of how he's standing on the medal stand while they're playing the Star Spangled Banner, and he's livid. He's incensed. And I said, Charles, what are you talking about? You were the Olympic champion. He said, yeah, but I had a chance to break the world record. I knew I had it in me, but tactically, I didn't schedule my heights and my jumps right, and I was just so angry. And ever since then, I've looked back in that moment and thought I robbed myself of a pinnacle athletic achievement because there's no joy. All we're thinking about is what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. I don't have an example on an Olympic medal stand, but I've got my own examples of times when I robbed myself of the gratification and the satisfaction of a job well done, and partially like a badge of honor, like, nah, it's no big deal. Like, I'm on to the next thing. And
that's right.
And that's something that I feel like
we get proud of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think sometimes there's a fear that if I wallow in the glory of this win, am I going to stay there? Am I
Yeah.
going to turn into someone who has a glory day? We don't
Mm.
want that moment to be, the glory day. Olympic
Yeah.
level, I think that could be one of them. But there's a fear that we're going to lose our drive
Yeah.
if we wallow in the victory. I don't
Yeah.
know.
There is a very fine line between complacency and contentment. And it's not against the rules to be content for that moment. I think the fear is it turns into complacency, and now I've lost that eye of the tiger. I've lost that edge that got me this far, and now I'm just relying on my past successes.
So if somebody is struggling with attitude and mindset, is there a strategy that you believe is accessible to anyone listening? Is there a first step they could take to shift that?
Yeah, I think it starts with just taking an inventory of who I think I am. One of the first exercises I do with my coaching clients is we go through, it's called a UCVMV, an ultimate concern, almost like your why, your purpose, and then your vision and your mission. Your vision, your mission, your values. Who do you see yourself becoming? Why does that matter? And who are you going to be in that process? And that's an exercise that a lot of people would look at and like, that's going to take too long. What a bunch of hooey. But how many chances do I get at this life? An unexamined life isn't worth living. I think somebody smarter than me said that. And so taking the time to specify what my ultimate concern is. For me, my purpose is to come alongside others and help them discover and pursue their own. Okay, that's fairly simple. One sentence, right? The vision, the mission, and values, those, I could rattle those off for you as well. But my hope with the people that I work with is if you can get real specific about your ultimate concern, your vision, your mission, your values, anytime that thought enters my mind that I'm not good enough or I can't do this, it has to confront what I said my ultimate concern is. And I can either reject that or I can let it keep seeping into my bones, because the reality is whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And
You're
so
right, that's right.
The more I allow that negativity to kind of marinate into my skeletal system, the more likely that is to actually be true.
I know a lot of times when people are doing the comeback, they will lean into something like a 75 hard routine, which I'm sure you're familiar, right?
Yep.
And they just are like, that's it, starting tomorrow. And it's hard. They do, then they say 75 days in a row, they're going to do, 2 workouts and one has to be outside. And I'm going to read this and do that. And then I believe the rule of the game is that if you miss one thing one day, you start again. Until you've done the whole 75. How effective do you think that type of approach is?
Done it. I did the first and the second phase of it. I wasn't able to finish. I think there's 4 altogether. And part of part 4 is you have to do it within a calendar year. So I would have to start at the very beginning. I would say it's helpful in cultivating good habits. It's terrible in terms of, like we were talking about, the rest and the recovery. I will tell you by the end of that, my workouts were trash. I was so overtrained and I was under recovered, and it wasn't, people will say like, this is not a fitness plan. This is a mental strength plan.
That's right.
Can I summon the strength that it takes mentally to put on my workout gear? For me, part of the biggest problem was the laundry. 2 workouts a day for 75 days in a row. That's a lot of towels. That's a lot of showers. If you're one that struggles with cultivating habit, then something like that. And my wife's done Duolingo now for like 4 years running. She's got a streak that's in the 4 digits, and she is not willing to let that streak die. That's a motivator for her. There are days when that streak was the difference between doing it and not. So if a hack like that is helpful for someone, then I'm all for it. 75 hard is not sustainable for me, but I use a habit tracker app. I'm not using it relentlessly right now. But if I say I'm going to work out at least 5 times a week, I want to drink a gallon of water a day, whatever those measurables are, then that's one more piece of data. That's one more gauge on the dashboard that's telling me whether or not I'm really serious about achieving what I said I was serious about achieving.
Well, tell me more about your app, The Science of the Comeback. What could people expect from that?
Yeah, it is my attempt to kind of assemble this into a companion that can come alongside daily if you want. There's an opportunity to journal. There's an opportunity to kind of build out that ultimate concern, VMV. It is kind of an entry point of coaching that, I'm available if someone is a subscriber to the app, but it's not like an individualized coaching experience. It's AI driven. It's a valuable tool, I think, and It's as comprehensive as I think it could be at this point, but it's really just my attempt. It's like $5 a month right now. It's super cheap, but again, it's accountability. It's a checkpoint. If you're really serious about this, can we reverse engineer, and then can I provide support to you along the way?
Well, and that's what I was wondering is the science of the comeback app, is that another option for those of us that look at 75 hard and say like, I'm not doing, like, it's not a path that we're going to go down. Is
Yeah.
the science of the comeback a different option someone could consider if they
Yeah.
really do want to create change and they're looking for that support to make it happen?
Yeah, I will say the 75 Hard app, every time you fail, you actually have to click a button that confirms that I failed. And that's a pretty hardcore approach. And Andy Frisella, I'm familiar with his work. He's the guy that kind of birthed it. And
Right.
I think what he's trying to do there is to cultivate mental toughness. That's really not the purpose. My app isn't to give you one more example of how you failed. It's here's a resource for you to help hopefully motivate your success. It's a different approach.
That's what it looked like to me from what I've checked out. And that's why I feel like it's an alternative path that may give someone the same type of outcome. Right. You know, but it's a different path. It's not that harshness. So I feel like it is definitely something to look at if someone is in a position where either personally, professionally, spiritually, if they're feeling as if they're underperforming or they've let themselves down or they've let others down.
Yeah.
Or they're failing and they're not even sure they're failing forward. Right.
Yeah.
It's like
it's a no judgment zone. It's self-paced. So it's not like, if you didn't do it yesterday, you get a nag message. Like, it's not like that at all. It is very much a tool set that will allow you to kind of navigate that purpose storm or whatever it is you're going through and kind of self-sort through the wreckage.
I feel like sometimes the intensity factor, if it scares someone off or if they are starting from a really low point in terms of self-perception, self-value, I don't know that it would happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
like you said, they may feel like they're setting themselves up for failure.
Yeah, agreed.
Where science of the comeback, you're setting yourself up for, correct me if I'm wrong, clarity in your mind and your vision. And the knowledge that if you control what you can control and you have consistency and time on task, that you're going to reap rewards.
Yeah, it's much less prescriptive than something like a 75 Hard is, where it's a checklist of things to do. You build your own checklist. There aren't necessarily accountability points within my app. But if someone wanted to use, my son uses Habit Bull. I use another called Habits. I mean, there's no shortage of habit trackers.
Out there, right?
And you can look at the analytics like, okay, 100% of the last 6 months, I completed my fitness goals, but 30% of the time I read my 10 pages. Well, maybe I need to either double down and I'm going to read that, or maybe I need to change the goal. Maybe it's not practical for me to set a goal of 10, and knowing that I'm failing at 30% of the time is demotivating me. So maybe I set a goal of 5, or maybe I set a goal of, I'm going to read a book 3 days a week. It's more flexible in that regard.
Or change it to something else stimulating. I know for a while I was listening to one album side on vinyl every day because I just needed listen to your own body and figure what is it that would move you forward towards that ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's really intriguing. You really have done a lot of research and give a lot of support in cognitive dissonance. Can you share with everyone, in case they're not a coach or they're not into this realm, what do you mean by cognitive dissonance?
Yeah. I use the term a purpose storm. It's kind of that experience or that sensation where who I've said I want to be doesn't match with where I am. And the example I'll use is when I was primarily in teaching roles and I wanted to be in admin roles and I wanted to have a greater say in what's going on in my campus. In my heart, I believed that I was able to do that, but I didn't have any experience. And it's kind of that eternal kind of, in order to get the job, you need experience, but in order to get experience, you have to get the job. And you're kind of stuck in that vicious cycle.
Quagmire.
And so I just really was struggling with, like, do I want this for the right reasons? Is this really important for me? Maybe I should just be satisfied with where I'm at. It kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. Is the goal too high? Do I need to manage expectations so that I can be in alignment and not have dissonance? or do I need to do something else so that I can achieve that kind of gnawing in my soul? And I always say I don't want to be a year older. I want to be a year better. So that led me to pursue an MBA. I was looking at ways of reaching out to mentors. I was really, again, what can I control? I can control those things. I can't control whether or not someone gives me a job interview. And so during that season, the real challenge is to have faith in that process and feel like, okay, like you really are pursuing what you think your ultimate concern is, your why. Are you in alignment? That's really a word I keep coming back to over and over, is alignment. Am I aligned with who I want to be as a human being? And subsequently, am I aligned with those that I want to serve?
I think it's critical. And I'm going to go on a limb and say that I don't think people reflect on that enough.
Yeah, I think that's 100% accurate. And that's why it's one of the first things I have people do in a coaching relationship, because if you're not where you want to be, but you haven't taken the time to figure out where that really is, you can't solve a problem that you're not aware of. And so maybe I'm turning all the wrong knobs to make life feel like it's meaningful for me, when in fact I should be over here pulling levers. And unless you take the time to really dig into that, you're just kind of flying blind.
So back to the cognitive dissonance and the purpose storm, how can someone tell if they're in it?
That's a good question. I kind of came up with this phraseology, if you will. I had a patient who had been through a thyroid storm, and the endocrine system is the chemical messaging system of the body. And someone in the midst of a thyroid storm, life-threatening condition, but basically the chemical messaging system within the body goes haywire, and messages get sent all over that aren't what's in the best interest of the entire organism, right? So I read that and I thought, there've been times in my life where I felt like just everything went wrong all at once, and I'm just kind of sitting in the wreckage trying to sort through. I was engaged and that fell apart. And I remember the heartbreak and the what now of that. There were times in my life where it was self-imposed, where I was afraid to try to go to medical school because of premeditated failure. I didn't even fail. Like my GPA was pretty good. Right. But I didn't want to get that rejection. And so I went another path. And so what it made me realize was, when we think we have it all figured out and then inevitably it falls apart, you're left with two options. You can just sit in the wreckage and just be a victim, or you can grieve, give yourself time and permission and space, because some of this is well beyond people's control. The loss of a loved one, or a relationship that you didn't want to end ends, or a job gets eliminated. Those are all horrible things that no one decided. But what's next is a conscious choice. I can decide to go back to school, or I can decide to do an internship and change paths. And so that purpose storm idea really just came from that connection of, it's all haywire, but it doesn't stay that way. It passes.
It passes, that's right.
Unlike a thyroid storm, a purpose storm can serve a purpose. There have been examples of times when, a horrible, I lived in West Texas for 15 years. We would have horrible thunderstorms with hail and damaging winds and rain, and no one would choose that, but it wiped away some things and allowed some people to rebuild differently than they would have otherwise. And some would tell you, I never would have chosen it, but I'm thankful for what happened in the aftermath, or in the days or the weeks or the months that followed. And so the storm didn't come to destroy, the storm actually came to form. And that's a powerful position of ownership that I can take.
It really is. And it allows you to find the strength to take that next step.
Yeah.
No matter how small it is.
Yep.
Just make sure that you're taking that next step.
A story I frequently use is, lots of times where I grew up in the Midwest, you would see trees that are near creeks or even rivers, and you would have a massive storm like this, and those trees are falling over. Right. Because their roots weren't deep, because the water was nearby. But you go a little further inland where the water isn't as readily available, and those roots are deeper and those trees are resilient. There's a lesson in there. Like that storm, I was able to weather it because I've encountered the resistance, or I've encountered even the destruction. I hate to say that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But when we've navigated those choppy waters, mixing my metaphors here, there aren't choppy waters and sailing with trees, but you get my point, is that the trials and the tribulations can form us in a way that having things go according to plan never could.
I think that's important for anyone listening right now. If they're made it with us this far and they're in a bad place right now, what we're saying is it will pass. And whatever choppy seas you're in right now, it's so trite, but it will make you stronger. You will either discover a strength within yourself, a talent that was untapped, latent tenacity. Something is there. So if you can recuperate, rest, and assess, get that clarity on what's most important to you, what can you control, and take that next step,
Yeah.
it's going to get you at least out of where you are today.
Yeah. I equate it. I just had an exercise physiology class final that I took. And one of the things I learned physiologically was that we have to encounter resistance in order to adapt positively. If you go to the weight room or you go to the trail or the street or the track to run, and what you're doing doesn't tax you in a way that's at or maybe even a little beyond your capacity, you don't adapt. You
That's right.
remain either right where you are, or in some cases you detrain. And that's easy to see physically. That's harder to see cognitively, where that was hard. Guess what? I can grow through hard things. In fact, the hard things probably grow me more than the easy things would have.
Yes, I agree. That is, exactly right. So it sounds like someone listening to this might think, well, this Toby guy certainly has everything worked out. His life must be perfect. All right, is every day is just a walk in the park with rainbows and unicorns and perfection?
I wish. I would love to tell anyone listening that you reach a point where you figure it all out. But as I said, some knowledge is learned and others is earned. And I'm learning and earning every day. I will never arrive until the day they put me in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a freedom with that. I think there is a willingness to understand. I mean, I'm going through something right now that I wouldn't have wished, but if I'm really honest about it, it's forming me in ways that that smooth sea wouldn't have. And I'm going to emerge from this better. I have to believe that. For me, I need that in order to work the problem. For others, maybe that's not how they're wired. I'm not saying my way is the way, but it's a way. I've encountered people before that have really kind of balked at the systemization of growth like that. And I've had people in my report structure that said, when you said that, I really thought you were saying I was inadequate. Like, no, everyone can grow. I want you to tell me where you want to grow. And then I'm going to come alongside and I'm going to clap for you louder than anybody else. And let's grow together. That's not how everybody's wired. And I've come to recognize that. But I would say for myself, yeah, I don't have it all figured out. But every day I'm trying to get a little better.
So tell me more about what you are currently working on. You're getting your 6th degree. You've got your app going. You have your coaching company. You're a professor. What is next on the horizon? What's happening is it writing more? What's your passion and where are you going now?
Yeah, I have a book project that actually predated all of this. And it started as a memoir that I started writing during COVID, just for me, just kind of introspective and reflective. And over time, it has changed pretty dramatically since I've had 100+ guests on my show and their stories are, really compelling. I've tried to weave those in. So I think I'm 7 or 8 chapters deep on a 13 or 14 chapter book. I hope to have that done late this summer, early this fall. I really am looking at getting more involved as a speaker and sharing this message because I've found that it seems to be one that resonates with a lot of people. And it's no longer just my story. Part of me felt like you're not important enough to write a memoir, kind of that inadequacy stuff.
That's right.
I've still kept my story woven within it, but I also recognize that there's value in the stories of others. And this idea that, just because it all fell apart doesn't mean that that's the end. It could literally mean that's the beginning of the comeback. And so that's kind of on the front burner right now. But beyond that, I have started taking on some more coaching clients. I do love to teach, so I'm happy to do that as well.
So if somebody was interested in coaching with you, who is your ideal type of client and where do you see that you have the biggest impact with people?
Yeah, my experience has been heavily in the athletic environment, but that's not exclusive. Like I said, the context doesn't matter. These are not things that are exclusive to athletes or those that work with athletes. I have spent a fair amount of time working with entrepreneurs and increasingly artists who are at inflection points in their life, who, maybe they've pursued that dream for as long as they feel like they responsibly can. And now there's a mortgage and a family, and they can't have that reckless abandon. Or increasingly, we see with AI, this is a massive kind of job industrial restructuring that we're in the midst of, and jobs are being lost and they're being changed. And people I won't say they're victim to it, but they're being caught in this change. That's an ample opportunity that I wouldn't have chosen to reskill,
Right.
upskill,
Right.
change. So I would say that anyone that feels like they're in the midst of uncertainty and maybe even that existential. I'm not a counselor. My wife is a counselor, but I am not a mental health care provider. But just like I say, as an athletic trainer, my biggest or most favorite thing to do is to take a healthy athlete and make them better. The clinician takes the injured athlete and gets them healthy. Right. Now that we're kind of healthy again, let's lean into this growth thing. And so I work in concert with a mental health provider I'm not in place of. So I'm careful to point that out.
Yes, I would say I am the same. I would describe myself in that same manner. And it's because my chosen industry is also real estate. We always joke that we wear all the hats.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not to replace when you actually need that clinician or you need that actual support in that arena. But it is, if you're going to put together a winning team, and if you really do want to reclaim or for the first time have extreme growth in an area, why not assemble the team? And there's nothing wrong with having, say, either a therapist, whichever type, and a coach, like you said, that is right there beside you, pushing you and getting you out of your own way. It would allow you to usually cover more ground with more confidence and hit some success metrics faster.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I'll offer for your listeners, no charge. There's nothing in it for me. If it sparks a good conversation, that's great. But TobyBrooksPhD.com/assessment. There's a pretty comprehensive state of your life assessment on there. Yeah. If they fill that out, I will generate a 9 or 10 page, pretty comprehensive result that kind of shows alignment in the aspects of life, whether that's work, whether that's relationships, whether that's whatever. So I think it really starts with an awareness. I can't solve problems if I don't understand them. And that first step is really to kind of take a critical look at what's serving me and maybe what's not.
Well, I think that would be fantastic. I'm going to go take it. I'll take it. I want to see. I love things like that.
Yeah.
And now that magazines are not as prevalent, I was, even from a young age, like if a magazine had a quiz or a poll or a I was always wanted to do it.
Yep.
So I will definitely do that. If it's not too scary, I could possibly even share my results on the podcast. Stay tuned if you all want to see. I can share the state of my life.
Yeah.
I think that this is really meaningful. Do most people reach out to you first in terms of, I'm guessing if you're working with athletes, performance, probably, like you said, they've gotten healthy and now they want to get back into their elite level of performance. Do you work with many people that are more strictly in a business capacity?
Some. I would say historically, the coaching side of what I do started really organically. I taught for 15 plus years in grad school. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my students that I had in class were going on and working. And as I said, athletic training is a tough job, 80 plus hours a week. The salaries aren't that great. And so I was getting 1 or 2 emails a week from former students saying, what am I like? I've got all this time and money and years of experience invested in this career. And they're in the midst of a purpose storm. They're thinking, if I abandon this, then that's all sunk cost. It's all for nothing. And can you help me? Like, what can I do elsewise with this degree?
Right.
How can I navigate this? Or is there a different practice setting that might be better? And so it really started unintentionally there, just providing counsel to students that I had served as best I could, and they had maintained relationship with me over the years, a LinkedIn message or an Instagram or something. Over time, as the message kind of grew, it became a lot more diverse. And so, a lot of entrepreneurs, artists, high achievers of all different types. And then sprinkle that along with the stories I've heard on my podcast, just the richness of the overcoming. One of my recent guests was on the Winter Olympics team. She was a speed skater. She was a collegiate soccer player. She had 9 surgeries and ultimately found her way to the Olympic speed skating team. Every step of the way, she's wondering, like, am I going to be able to come back from this one? So that that uncertainty, like it's easy to look in the rearview mirror of the back window and be like, yeah, didn't it okay. But when it's in the windshield, you don't know. And having someone that can come alongside you and equip you with some tools and some exercises and things like that can really, really be beneficial.
It really can. It also, there is something about, I know some people call it the bartender effect, where when someone is not right in your backyard, not in your immediate circle, they are not attached to you doing X, Y, or Z, you have a whole different conversation with them. I
That's
mean, you know
absolutely right.
that they have curiosity around you. And as you said, want to figure out, well, where do you want to grow or where do you want change? All right, let's go do it.
Yeah.
That is, if you've never tried that, I do think and you want change, highly recommend considering getting a coach and reaching out. Do that assessment, do that, and see what's possible for you.
Yeah, completely agree.
Well, Toby, I really want to thank you for coming and sharing all of this with the Inner Estate. I find it intriguing, the thought of a purpose storm. I like that language. I feel like I want to dissect that and see, what does a purpose storm mean for me? Where may I already be experiencing it? And this might sound a little crazy, but I was thinking, if I want to create some change, maybe I should create a purpose storm intentionally so that I can get myself moving along. I guess that would be active self-sabotage. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one way. I mean, I've
No.
never had a student who said, hey, I quit my job today, but I've had some pretty close.
That's
Sometimes
right,
the
yeah.
storm comes to us. I guess sometimes we can summon it.
Sometimes we invite the storm through the front door, right? But it's really, this is something that is meaningful. And I know that you are touching so many people's lives. A quick question. Is there another degree after the sixth one? Or do you
I think so.
6 is
Yeah,
enough?
no, I'm already
You think
thinking.
so? There you go.
Yeah, there are
Okay.
a couple of options here. The MBA really kind of whet my appetite for more work on leadership. And my PhD and my first master's were in teaching and teacher education. So it's like adjacent to higher ed leadership, but not directly. So yeah, I think so. I'll probably be enrolled in a class when they put me in the ground.
Hold on, Grim Reaper. I have to finish this class.
Yeah.
It's over a quarter of the hour.
Yeah.
I think that that's remarkable and it's very inspiring.
I
But I want to
appreciate
thank you
that.
for sharing. If you're listening to this podcast, anywhere that you're consuming it, all of the contact information to connect with Toby will be in the description. And I hope that you'll come back as well and listen to the next episode of The Inner Estate. Comment wherever you're watching this. So have you ever been in a purpose storm and how did you get out of it? What did you learn or what did you earn? So really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Toby, for being our guest.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Bridget.
Thank you.